Hello. So I was hoping I would get a chance to, I was hoping I can get a chance to speak with you before my kids get up. So um, I just want to talk about how real estate, and in particular wholesaling real estate, um, made me a better person. Um, I come from humble beginnings. I grew up in a small town, um, very small town. The population, I think, was around 800 people or 900 people. And I, um, I mean, as far as education goes, coming from a town that small, you don't really get good education, you know. So um, when I graduated and I went to the military, I went to the Air Force after I graduated. Um, it kind of when I made that transition from being in that town all my life, never really going on vacations or anything. When I made that transition into adulthood, getting out on my own and having my own place or whatever, when I was in the military, um, I started getting exposed to different kinds of people. And I started learning different things that I didn't learn being trapped basically down there in that little town. Um, so I realized once I got around all these different people from different places, I realized how limited our education was where I come from. I didn't know a lot of things, a lot of things I had to relearn when I got into my early adulthood. Um, but, going forward to where I am now, um, when I got into real estate, I I wasn't really a professional, and and what I mean is, and what I mean by that is, I didn't really know how to talk to people in a way that would ultimately benefit me. Now, I was friendly and I could talk to people. I can talk to anyone. And I was friendly with people, and I've always been good with people. Always been good with people. But when I got into real estate, I learned how to be transactional. Like when you start talking to sellers and negotiating, getting into that whole thing, the whole thing of negotiating, um, it makes you talk in a way to where you are ultimately trying to benefit from this conversation in some kind of way. And that benefit is, to um, get their house on the contract if you're wholesaling, or the benefit is to, ultimately make money from them, whatever plight that they're going through. And, you want to make money from the house being sold, as a bird dogger or a wholesaler. That's what you want. So before I got into real estate, I never knew anything about transactional conversations. Everything was just friendly. I was just friendly with people, just talking to people, getting to know people, jokes, But when I got into real estate, man, it changed me to now I'm able to talk to people in a way that if I want something from them, um, I can, kind of manipulate the conversation, not the person really, but I'm kind of manipulating the conversation to where I can get something out of it. Now, it doesn't have to be anything, you know, um, it doesn't have to be a financial benefit. It can be value, learning from someone. Like, for example, when I'm speaking to my father-in-law, like my wife's husband, I mean, not my wife's husband, but my wife's father, when I'm speaking to him, He has a lot of value because he has a lot of experience in living life or whatever, So he's like 30 years my senior. And when I speak to him, I take what I learned from wholesaling and real estate investing. I mean, it's really all real estate investing. I take what I learned from real estate and apply that to people like him, who I want to get something from, get something out of. I speak to him in such a way where I ask a lot of questions. I ask a lot of questions and I kind of direct the conversation to an outcome of some sort. And now I got other things that I do besides, making YouTube videos or TikTok videos about real estate investing. I got other endeavors that I'm involved in, and the same still applies. Like I take what I learned from real estate and apply those techniques and skills into my other endeavors, and they really help me. My skills that I learned in real estate really helped me in my life, and I never really knew that it would be like this. I got into real estate just to make money. All I wanted to do was make some money. If you go to my sales page on my website, kelvinosimmsjr.com, and that's where I sell my course at. If you go there, you can see my bank account. I took a picture of my bank account last year. It's more now, but I took a picture of my bank account last year, and I took a picture of my bank account years ago. Like I had a picture of my phone of I think it was like 2017. I think it was 2017 because I started wholesaling or bird dogging. I really started bird dogging. My first deal, my first introduction into real estate investing was a wholesale deal. But after that, I started doing bird dogging. But I took a picture. I had a picture already in my phone of my bank account in 2017. And I mean, I had like nothing in there. And I took a picture of it at the time in 2017 because I was like, man, I want to remember this. And this is going to sound like one of those stories that you always hear, those, rags to riches type of stories, where like Jim Carrey, where he wrote himself a $10 million check and then, he got paid $10 million for acting. This is going to sound just like that, but I took a picture of my bank account in 2017 and I didn't have hardly nothing in there. And I took a picture of it and I said, man, I do not want to be like this. Like, how am I, whatever, however old I was at the time. I mean, I probably was like, 25 at the time, I believe. I was like, man, how am I 25 years old and I don't have anything in my bank account at all? And I mean, that picture that I took, I can't really remember what it was, but it was nothing in there. And I was amazed at that. I was like, man, I have absolutely no money in the bank. Like I couldn't go buy anything that I wanted to buy. If I wanted to buy something, I couldn't go buy it. I had to use credit. I was using credit at the time to basically pay my bills and just live. I was using credit cards. And because I had a spending problem, I had a real bad spending problem. And man, I want to tell you this, real estate, investing in real estate, wholesaling, bird dogging, investing in real estate changed my spending habits because I started meeting millionaires and I started learning from them just by observing them, and listening, I would, this one guy I've been wholesaling my deals to and bird dogging for this one guy. He lives here locally in my area. And he was like one of my first cash buyers. We call them cash buyers, but really they're like your partners, because no one uses cash. No one uses cash. Well, he uses his retirement account to invest. But I mean, he uses his retirement account as a backing. He really goes to the bank and gets a loan for the acquisition. So he buys the property with a loan, and then he does the renovation or remodel with another loan. So he goes in completely, in debt. Basically, he goes all the way in debt, and then once he flips the property, he pays off that debt. The debt that he took out to flip the house and the debt that he took out to buy the house. He pays it off, and then if he makes $5,000, that's profit. Because sometimes these renovations, man, these guys, they renovate. I commend them because sometimes they don't make as much as they think they're going to make. Like, the guy I'm talking about, when I first met him, he told me, he was like, man, sometimes, I aim to make 50K, but sometimes I just make 3. But it works for him because he takes a loan out. His percentages are square because, when you take a loan out, and you have to pay, you have to pay some cash for, getting the loan, and that whole process. You have to, use some cash. But all you really need is, backing, so the bank they'll give you, I think they give him a really, really low interest rate. I don't really know the particulars of his loans or whatever, but they give him a good interest rate because he has the money, in his retirement account. But like I was saying, what was I saying? I was saying that, when I first met him, I was bird dogging to him. And, I was saying that when I met him and people like him, because there's other people I met like him, millionaires, I noticed that they don't buy anything like people that I know, who I know, what they buy. They buy everything. I have friends that have cars that, cost them $1,000 a month. A lot of my friends, they want to, look good. They want to look good. And I noticed that people in low to middle class, we spend way more than people in, like the guy I'm talking about, my cash buyer, my first cash buyer. He's rich, he's rich. He's considered, upper middle class. No, not upper middle class. He's like, he's in the top. I don't even know those percentages, but he's making, I'll just say this. He has probably about $2 or $3 million in real estate, not cash. $2-3 million in real estate, and he's probably making on his real estate. He has all houses, so he's probably making about $200 to $300K a year on his, just on his houses, on his real estate portfolio. So, he's considered, rich compared to me and you, or if you're watching this and you're, where he's at, then, that's great. But people in low to middle class, we spend like crazy. We want the nicest cars, trucks, whatever. And I noticed that he does not buy anything that, like anything that depreciates, like cars and things like that. He doesn't buy anything like that costs $1,000 a month. Like I remember one time we was talking and he was like, he went to the car lot and he went to one of these car dealerships locally, and they was trying to sell him a truck, and the truck was going to cost him $1,000 per month. And he called me after he talked to this person at the dealership, and he was talking to me. We was talking about real estate, but he told me that he had just came from the dealership, and he was like, man, they tried to, sell me this car for $1,000 a month. And I was like, are you crazy? You know what I'm saying? I'm like, he's making like, $20,000 to $30,000, a month. And to a person like me at the time when he was telling me about this, I was like, that's not bad. I mean, if you're making $30,000 a month, what's $1,000? You know what I'm saying? For a car that you want. He already has 4 cars. So this was a 5th car he was going to buy. And all his other cars are paid off. And see, that's another thing about rich people. They pay their things off. You know what I mean? They usually use cash. They buy cars with cash, and that's a smart thing to do. If you have the means to do that. But he doesn't have like 2026 cars, 2025, model cars. He has like, 2010 model cars, 2013 model cars, that are all paid off. But these are not brand new cars. He could really buy any car he wants because on top of real estate, he has other income coming in as well. But I was just astonished at, how carefully he counts each dollar he makes. And I was like, man, he is, if he's worried about spending $1,000 a month on a car, what are my friends and colleagues doing? What are they doing? They're making a fraction of what he's making. They're making $50,000 a year and got $1,000 car payment. I mean, I was looking at those two, situations, those two types of thinking. And I was like, man, what am I doing? You know what I'm saying? Like, what have I been doing? This is why I'm broke because of this type of thinking. So from conversations like that and other conversations with other investors I know, it just really taught me, like, do not get caught up in this broke type of thinking, Don't get caught up in that. You need to think just like these people do. Like, if they're not buying cars that cost you $1,000 a month, if they're not buying a 2025 whatever car, you shouldn't buy that, be doing that either. You know what I'm saying? You shouldn't be buying a brand new car and spending that much money on a car, no matter how much money you make, unless you can buy that car cash. That's the only thing. If you can buy that car cash, buy it. And if you'll be okay afterward, after spending that cash on that car, then that's the way you do it, because that's basically what my friend does. He buys his cars cash, and he buys cars that cost like $30,000, $40,000, something that you can, that's reasonable. You can save up that much money if you're making money. If you're not making any money, you're just relying on your, job. It's hard to save that much money unless you got like a crutch, unless you, living with your parents or staying with someone, roommates or whatever, and you're saving, at least almost 50% of your money. If you can do that, then you can save up $30,000 to $40,000. It just depends, it depends on how frugal you are. If you're not frugal, then it's hard to do that. But like I said, being in real estate taught me these lessons that I wouldn't have learned otherwise, just by living, and watching millionaires and billionaires on YouTube or whatever. Because, you hear about Warren Buffett, how he is, really frugal, and, he doesn't really spend much. He's still alive. He stays in the same house that he bought in the 60s or the 50s or whenever. So you always hear about guys like him and Charlie Munger and how frugal they are. But it's kind of different. It's kind of different with them. They're really renowned and they have a lot of givers. Warren Buffett talks about staying in his house, same house that he bought in the 50s or whatever, but he has a private jet supplied to him by his company. I mean, he's the CEO, and his company, Berkshire Hathaway, owns many others. So they have privileges, but they do, as far as like being a billionaire, they are frugal. They are frugal, and you have to use what you learn from these people. I mean, if you're learning strictly from YouTube, it's best to learn from real world experience, because it's relative to you. If you're able to talk to millionaires or billionaires, it's just relative to your situation, wherever you are in your financial, stage, wherever you are financially. If you're able to get into the rooms with these people, you can learn from them. And it'll be relative to your situation, because, how can you get next to this person if you're not doing something to get you next to that person, wherever you are. And I hope that makes sense. But, these are lessons that I learned in real estate. And I recommend that you invest in real estate. If you're on the fence about it, I recommend that you do it, because you'll learn these life lessons that you, like I said, like that you would never know, that you would never learn from just watching, YouTube or social media. You have to really talk to these people in person, because it will change your life. I'm telling you, because man, my whole thinking was just backwards. I just realized like it was just so backwards. And another thing about real estate that is really, really great is that you get to go out here in a town, in your city, wherever you live at, and you get to kind of like paint the city. You get to kind of paint it to your liking. If I ride around my neighborhood or whatever neighborhood that I invest in, and if I see a house that looks dilapidated and doesn't look good, I can find out who that person is that owns that house, contact them, and maybe they want to sell. And then if they do want to sell, I would hand it off to a person who wants to flip a house, and that person will flip that house and make that house look really, really nice. And now the value of that neighborhood has just went up a bit. And from that point going forward, the values will rise. The values will rise in a neighborhood where people, where sellers are fixing up their houses, and if the neighborhood looks good and it's desirable by future new buyers who want to live in that neighborhood, the value goes up. The value goes up. And see, then at that point, you look back and you say to yourself, like, man, I took that ugly duckling and turned it into a swan. I just made that neighborhood that looked, kind of sketchy. I just made it look desirable for new people. I mean, new families, people that just had a child, or, a young family with kids, they can live there and they can feel safe in that neighborhood. I had something to do with that. And it's just an amazing feeling when you look back and see the transition. I mean, the transition from going from nothing to wow. There's a family there now, and they have kids, and the neighborhood is safer. Because the value's going up, and it's only because when the values go up, prices go up. And you have to make a certain amount of income to buy a house in that neighborhood. So it's bad to say, it's kind of sad to say it, but people, a lot of crime happens, in the low income sector, and yes, these people do get pushed out of these neighborhoods, and it's a bad thing. And I don't know how to save the world. I don't know how to save the world. All I know how to do is tell you what I see, and that's what happens. As I've been, I've been doing this for 8, 9, 10 years now, and I see that a lot. You see neighborhoods that you know looked really bad and kind of crime stricken. These neighborhoods are sought after by investors, and they get in there and they start fixing the neighborhood up, buying houses, fixing them up, and it really kind of kicks the low income people because it could have been a neighborhood that was like 70% rentals. I mean, that is a that neighborhoods like that, they tend to have a lot of low income people in them, people who make low income, and those people end up as this neighborhood gets fixed up, properties start looking better, the landlords start charging more rent. These people have to get they get kicked out of this neighborhood, and now this neighborhood is filled with middle income people. This area is getting better, so they're attracting better people there. Not as far as like better people. Not to say that low income people are not great people, because I come from low income and we were great people. My family, I grew up around low income people. So, and I always found the smartest people in those situations, the smartest people, the most respectful people in low income. So I don't want to bash low income. I'm just strictly speaking from, because we can count money. I'm just strictly speaking from that. So, well, listen, I got to go because I got my family here. So I'll talk to you later.